Hello. Talking about set 9 because I kind of just feel like with the set on Twitter as well, I've sort of made a few jokes about how dull the set is and sort of my opinions on it. But I've always tried to note that I'm actually having quite a lot of fun playing this set. I think I joked that it was feeling a bit like you don't know if you're playing a sealed event sometimes with these bulk cards that you put in, or bulk box cards that you put in your deck, like Mr. Arrow. That card was never a card anyone dreamed of playing, but kind of sees a lot of viability. And I think there's some good things in that. There's a 4-cost Stitch that is inkable, and when it challenges and banishes something, it gains a law and draws you a card. That card was always decent, but there was just other more powerful cards in its seeing place. That's great. I just wanted to, yeah, I kind of got the joke of saying about bulk box and everything. But overall, I think the set is actually kind of fun to play, or I've been enjoying and testing it. I think there is actually some depth there, and I put my Amber Steel on the screen because this looks like the big bad of the set and the one that everyone's sort of complaining about. And like, it is a deck you definitely have to try and beat when you're playing into set 9. It is going to be quite powerful, and I think it's going to be quite popular. It's relatively cheap. It has a few rares in there, but to be honest with you, it's more of a pile deck. I mean, once you've got things like Lady and probably Daisy as well, like Daisy being a super rare, you can kind of just jam it full of two questers and jam it full of things that you enjoy playing. You put anything you like in there. It's sort of, this is what I would say is the most optimal. I'm seeing a lot of people pick Tiana over this build and are not liking the new Nala card, but I still think you need to worry about uninkable counts, and you don't want to be inking up to a dock play and having to, basically lose the game because you drew 3 uninkables in the row. But yeah, I put it on the screen because it seems to be the big bad of the set. But overall, yeah, I'm quite enjoying it. And I was going to do this video and cover about this deck in particular, cover what like to anticipate for the set, and cover like the play style and like the design. I don't know what the design. I probably don't know the design of it, but the what to expect from it and how it feels playing. So the first point is I'll go with like how it feels, and going from set 8 to set 9, of course, you've got a couple more weeks if you're playing at your locals. Most likely a couple more weeks until you'll have to adopt set 9 and play this. And I'll admit, when you go, there's a lot of changes that happened. The power level completely has. I'm gonna use the word plummet because it has actually quite plummeted down. And cards that could just be like a vanilla 5/6 is just good. I think like a lot of people using Clarabelle in green blue. I think like the main strength for that isn't the card draw, because you probably won't get any. The main strength for that card is that it's a 5/6, and that number is just really hard to deal with, and it can trade up and remove a lot of things from the board. So going into it, you'll notice that the power level of all the cards. We had all these cards that on them written like amazing things, like Diablo said it had evasion, and on your opponent's door draw a card. Like, that's really cool. That's really different, interactive. You'd have Maui Shark that had loads going on the card as well. The 6-cost Tamato, even the 8-cost Tamato. They did a bunch of things on them. Right now, it's kind of going back to basics. Like, a lot of these cards are just have Challenger or have Resist 1, like Mr. Arrow does, or Calhoun gets you 2 law. That's probably the most interesting card on the list here, really. And Lilo's kind of interesting and give Resist 1 or has Resist 2 like Rhino does, or Lawrence is just a 4/4 unless he has down. There's a very basic, in my opinion, things, and it feels like why I'd say that it feels it's plummeted the power level. I played during set 1. I remember even playing on the beta, like sort of beta level, like when they were slowly releasing the set 1 cards, and we were playing each card as they were released, and Pascal was released, and it was really overpowered because they also hadn't released the other evasion cards at the time. I remember all those things, and I remember playing during set 1, playing different little events, and like using my attempt at building a Ruby Amethyst deck. But it still felt very much like the Lorcana, the way it was up to set 8 and up to this rotation. You had your aggro decks, you had your control decks, you had all those like aggro cheese decks, control things. And I remember the Ruby Amethyst Mirrors. That was the deck I liked to play, and you played with this huge hand advantage. You got to draw from Magic Mirror, you drew a card a turn, you get to do all those things like that, and play for board, play for resources, do trading, making interesting challenges, all those really cool things. You got to do everything like that. And then you also had your Whole New World decks, where of course everyone like come to know how much they love Whole New World. You had to do all those fun things. They felt very interactive, and they felt very challenging, and there was just a lot going on in the game. Now it doesn't feel like that. It feels like it's one almost below that. We've got some fun cards in there. I'd say like Daisy feels quite interesting, and I guess Lilo is as well. But it's still, to my original point, fairly basic in what they do compared to the way decks were. Like if you look at a set 9 deck and compare it to maybe the most extreme example would be green blue items. That deck had about a million interactions you could ink, and then you'd have to make about 5 decisions on getting a item off the top of your deck into interacting with all your items. You have to do all those amazing little things. We don't think we really have that anymore. You can still play Oswald and you do things like that, but without Pop School and Workshop, it doesn't feel great. A lot of the gameplay, it doesn't seem to matter which deck you pick. You will go into a point where you're just going to play a strong curve out and then top deck and play the cards off the top. And to be honest with you, at this point, I've played green purple, amber steel, purple steel, blurple, like everything that I think is probably going to be taking up the bulk of the meta going into set 9. And pretty much all of those decks feel like they go into top deck mode. You have some benefits, like if Blurple goes into top deck mode, you could get Finders Keepers, or a lot of the deck, because it's a ramp deck, is built in the top end, so you could play Anna, Hades, Monstro, you can play all these big characters. For the aggressive decks, they might just have a lot of 2-questers, and they're going to build things in like I can top deck another dock, or I can top deck a Be Our Guest and most likely find another dock. So it feels like, knowing that the gameplay or the game patterns and the way it's going to play is that you're going to mulligan for a very strong curve, play your curve out, and then probably go into top deck mode. You can do with that information. You can find ways to go, well, then I want my top end heavy. I don't want to have that many 1-drops in the deck because I don't want it when I get into that mode, which I'm going to not lie, it's pretty rare for a deck to not do that. We don't have Rabbit, we don't have Friends on the Other Side, we don't have Tamatoa drawing as much of items with Popsicles. We just don't have the ability to draw and harvest like a great hand size like we've had in the basically from set 1 to set 8. It's always felt like you could do that. So you can use those things to your knowledge and like deck build like that. Like a lot of the decks at the start, I was enjoying a deck with like it was mediumly spread. There was a lot of 1-drops, 2-drops, and then a late end stuff. But overall, it sort of felt like I just wanted top end stuff. So I was 4xing. Like I played a Sapphire Steel Allies deck, and I'd 4x Tinkerbell and Vincent, the 2/8 that deals 3 damage. And I thought about putting Hades in there just because when I get to that ink spot, I just want every card off the top to be a giant bomb that I can play on the board. And of course, there's describing that compared to what we had in the previous sets may not be your cup of tea. It may not be something you enjoy. I can't say that I love this too much. Of course, I played Kiwi Birds for a lot of time and played that quite competitively, and that deck was completely... Basically, if you played Kiwi Birds, it's kind of how all the set 9 decks feel. You play a very strong curve out. If you don't win off the bat of that, it's in top deck mode, and you want your top decks to be good, you want them to be powerful, and you want to be just playing a bomb every turn. It feels even like, if green blue versus green blue goes into a mirror, it doesn't feel like they're playing a big resource war, trying to control the board and trying to get an edge on each other, like resources wise. It just feels like, I'll play my Clarabelle, you play your Hades, then I'll play my Hades, then you play your, and we just play like big bombs against each other until one of us falls over and doesn't have another character to play. And it kind of just feels like that with pretty much most of the decks. So you have a lot of these decks that are just gonna, you do your early bit, maybe some genies get some lore, whatever. Maybe you have a little bit of a fight in the middle ground and trade characters up. And then by the end, it's just play big character after big character, or, maybe get lucky and find a dock or find a Finders Keepers and draw a bunch of cards. It just kind of, that's how the game has felt for me, especially in this really early sort of testing stage. And I don't want to really put any absolutes on things. I feel like I still haven't seen much play in the Powerline thing, besides people saying they really like that movie and the characters in that movie. I haven't seen many people go out there and build something with Powerline, and I think that might come down to the fact that the songs aren't that great. I think some of the Max Goof and Goofy stuff's pretty cool. I've seen some play with that, with just the ability to recycle actions is pretty cool. It looks like a lot of the removal outside of Strength for the Raging Fire is based off action-based removal. So, fire the cannons, and it's kind of rough, and using Standout to challenge things, and it could basically take your entire turn to remove something, and you're kind of hoping that, well, you could do things like, well, I hope that my opponent has gassed out, because that's how this game seems to work right now. So if I spend the turn to play an action and take something out, and maybe that action says draw a card, that's even better. And maybe I can just stabilize on that, because they're not going to play much more after that. Whereas right now, it's like, if you played an action-based removal, they're likely, great, I just got 5 other cards in hand and I'll just play them on the board. It doesn't feel like that too much anymore. You can get punished by action-based removal, which is kind of interesting. Kind of, it depends on how much you like it. So yeah, it really does feel like the game's power level has plummeted quite a bit down. And in my opinion, I don't know if I'd say this makes the game more player friendly or better for newcomers or whatever, because a lot of people said that's the idea of the set. It's like, oh, a lot of newcomers will enjoy the game. They get to play their pirate steel, or they get to play their red steel, or whatever they want to at locals, and they have a good shot. They won't just get stomped out in the meta by Ruby Sapphire players and all those sort of big control decks. And I kind of would disagree with that point. I don't think the game's become any more friendly for newcomers, because if you go to your locals, your sweats will just be on the top meta thing there anyway. If that be amber steel, blurple, green purple, whatever it be, they're just going to still beat you very easily. And they're just going to take full advantage of cards like Lilo. So yeah, I don't imagine that. It just feels like the experience for everyone is different. It's a lot less powerful, and I think games do need to reset their power level during rotations. I didn't imagine it would be this much of a reset, feeling like we haven't been left much to play with, and it kind of puts, like, Doc is really on a pedestal right now because there just isn't other card draw that's any good. If you look at Green Purple's options now, they can't sing Friends, they don't have the Diablo idea anymore. Really, if you look at those lists, besides the Genie being a cantrip draw that will just give you a replace itself, it's only really Pull the Lever that will draw them a great deal of cards, and that's only 2 cards, and that's an action they have to play. Whereas Blurple as well, they have to play Finders Keepers. They draw 3 cards, and it'll be 5 inks. It'll most likely be their turn because we're not inking very high anymore. We can't really achieve high ink levels without completely damaging our hand. And that's why Doc just seems pretty good. Draw 2 cards, get a body on the boards, only pay 2 ink. Job's are good, and it's not too bad. And that's why he's sort of coming to the forefront. And I guess the best thing that's always been paired with Doc has been Amber Steel. Purple Steel kind of has a shout and a guess at that as well. But yeah, that's kind of why these Doc decks come to the front, and that's kind of all my opinions on the game plan and like what to expect with set 9. It's this very different. Power level is quite low. Like, curve your deck out. We don't really have these big control and these big decks anymore. It's just feels like we're curving with every deck that I've played so far. And I'm still saying this, like, I'm having fun, I'm enjoying the game, I still really like the game. Of course, these are all take what opinions you like, form your own opinions based on stuff, but I'm still having a blast playing with everyone. It would have been nice to get a few new cards, but to be honest with you, Lilo, the new Steel Lilo card that is proxied on this list, the 3-cost one, would be just really good. They're really good fun, and it changes the board state so much, giving +2 challenger to everything, and that's enough really to change the game up for me sometimes. It would be nice to get a few more new cards, but that card's quite impactful. So to go on to that, from blabbering on about my opinions on set 9 and like how I'm feeling about it, and just pretty excited for the DLC, to be honest with you still. And I think as well, a lot of players will keep the secret sources they know hidden for things like the DLC, hidden for things like the ink. I don't put myself in that bracket because I'm not good enough to know these secret source lists and build them and think of like crazy combos and stuff like that. But I'm pretty sure as the set unravels, we'll see more interesting stuff. But the sort of arcing thing that everyone's worried about is there's always a big bad of the set. If it's not Ruby Sapphire Shark, if it's not Ruby Amethyst back in the day, if it's not Bucky or whatever, it's always got to be one thing. And right now it seems to be Amber Steel is going onto it, but not a lot of people want to play it because it feels kind of just dumb broken. And to be honest with you, sometimes it just doesn't work. I think you're looking for those aggressive questers with Daisy early on, and sometimes you could be stuck with a Captain Hook and a Calhoun, and that's not the game where you wanted it. And then the game where you do want the Captain Hook and the Calhoun, you find a Daisy and a Lilo, and you're playing out these things that have no strength for the board. So sometimes I feel like it just doesn't work, and I don't know how much I enjoy that lack of consistency. And there's no real way to punish anyone for turning things sideways on their board. You've got no Rapunzels, you've got no huge get back in, draw some cards sort of cards. So overall, when you play against it enough, it doesn't feel too scary. And to be honest with you, I think a lot of the green decks that I'm seeing like lists going out there and what I've played to, I think a lot of them are validated by things like give reckless cards like Lewis and um, Rapunzel and John Silver, the one that got reprinted, they're kind of a bit more validated because there's so much aggro going around. Those cards are just really backbreaking, and your opponent kind of has to win the game before they become really relevant. You expect one Lewis, and that's why Captain Hook's in the deck, as I've mentioned. But going on from that point, it's like if they can get a Rapunzel down, there's no way you're doing 5 damage to that evasive thing. And John Silver will maybe slow you down, quest, then get traded into, but it stopped, questing twice and made you trade some cards in. So it feels like green's really validated by the fact that aggro is around, which is really cool to see that it's not as scary as people think it is. And if you've seen any of the posts going around about the Tiana, the restaurant owner, I think it's called, it's a free cost 1/4, and when it's turned sideways, -3 to everyone unless you pay 3. So you basically have to remove it if you want to remove anything on the opponent's board. I don't love that card. I've seen some crazy lines with the Aurora where you can get it down on turn 2, and they made a tweet about that as a joke. And the ability for them to just flood and dump their hand and get this Tiana set up. But I still think like you've got cards like Lewis, you can spend restand it, you can still sing strength on it, and a lot of people are aiming to be able to sing strength before because they want to remove genies as well. You got cards like Into the Unknown, and later on in the game, it's also a brick as well. If you're playing 4 copies of it, 4 daisies, 4 Calhouns, 4 dot, you're breaking up the deck already. You're going really high on ink count. So I don't see that card being that scary. But of course, there always has to be a villain of every set, and it seems like Amber Steel Aggro is that villain right now. That I wouldn't be too worried about that. I imagine very early on it will take advantage of its villainousy and how powerful it seems. But as the sets go on, I think green has been quite the punishment for it. They do need to be out of the gate winning the game, otherwise they sort of slowly just lose the game. And even things like Blurple don't feel impossible into it. And a lot of these purple steel and like other dock decks are just built very mid-rangey to battle it. So if you're looking at Amber Steel, it feels like it is the thing that has the biggest target on its head and will be the most countered. So I imagine it just does an absolute blast the first week, but it will just be kind of put in its place quite easily after a while. And it does feel strange to say that green feels like the real counter to the aggro. To give the reckless just feels so strong. Whenever I've play tested it, it's just when you play against red right now, it feels like you have a clock. You have to win the game before they start locking you out and start Sisuing and B prepping. Versus green, it feels like you have to do it even sooner now before they start playing Rapunzels and establishing Rapunzels and establishing what's it called, John Silvers and stuff. Just before they get that board locked down, and then they'll start progressing their board and win it back. So I don't think this is as scary as people are making it out to seem. I'm enjoying set 9, even though it's a bit of a different vibe from what I've mentioned, from what I've we've expected from the past few sets. It's a fun game. Really, if you've got any points, please do comment them below, and comment and tell me how your testing and stuff's going, because I'm really having fun. I think it's sometimes I'm having fun in a strange way. I'm absolutely laughing my head off that some card I've only ever seen in bulk boxes is being played on the board by players who I really respect or whatever, and they're like, no, it's a good card right now. But it's all good fun, and it's, to be honest with you, the game is what you make of it. We still get to play a lot of the fun cards we like, and don't be too scared of Amber Steel Aggro. Please don't take that in a way that it sounds like I'm saying it's not a relevant deck. It's completely relevant. It's very powerful, but it just feels like there's going to be a lot of answers for it. And we've always got to have a villain. We've always got to have something to complain about. That's just card games in general. So right now it's Amber Steel Aggro, but I feel like it's going to meet its maker soon.